Thank you so very much, Bashar, for that incredible practice. There's so much that I can pull from it. I really like that at the beginning you shared with us that this is almost too short of a time to explore this. And what I love is that we're going to be able to dig deeper into this tomorrow. The parts that really resonated with me was the equilibrium component, right? How we show up present, how we physically show up in these spaces, how we mentally show up in these spaces. I'm already sort of internalizing, am I leaning too close or too far from the camera from learning that, which is really, really meaningful and important. And then that last piece that you just shared about listening, right? And like, and understanding, listening to understand. That can be something that so often is, is misunderstood and misutilized in our work, in the agency and the haste and the need to kind of always do more. We often miss the opportunity to have these deep, meaningful, authentic connections and relationships with our colleagues, with our partners, with our sponsors, understanding their core foundational needs. And I think you did such an excellent job summarizing a lot of that in the short time that you had. And I'm so looking forward to exploring this deeper tomorrow when you have that sit-down Q&A with Vinod. Now, for those of you who found that so meaningful and as engaging as I did, what I would really encourage you folks to do is, if you haven't already, please feel free to put some of your questions in the chat, or you can email them to info@futureofgood.co. We'll do our best to kind of share some of those questions as part of our Q&A tomorrow morning when Bhaskar and Vinod sit down and really dig into these practices and this awareness a little bit more. Really, this is critical to our navigation of this summit and essential to our own well-being as we embrace this space. What I encourage everyone to do is be in this space with equilibrium, be in this space in a way that shows that you are present, that you are understanding, listening to understand, and that you are there to connect not just with each other, but with yourself and your own learning. So thank you very much, Bhaskar, for that, and a pleasure to have you open this for us. Thank you very much. Awesome. Well, now that we are all in a place of well-being to start the summit, I really want us to open up the stage and open up the space with a really critical understanding of why we're all here. We're here, of course, to cultivate well-being, but what does that actually really mean? When we structurally try to understand the needs of our organizations, what are the topics that are most present right now, most meaningful, most immersive, most potent? What are the things our organizations are struggling with, our teams are struggling with? What are the things that we as individuals are struggling with? And I think that there's no better way to start a summit like this than to open up that conversation by talking about, what are these top trends? What are the 5 top trends in wellness right now for organizations? We might touch on more than 5, but what we've done is we've curated a really amazing plenary panel of just true change makers in their own right that will be exploring these topics with us, having a really rich, dynamic conversation, and really just setting the stage for all the learning that you folks will do throughout the day. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 5 change makers for the opening plenary on top trends shaping workplace well-being. Joining me today, we have a few folks. Mary Donahue is North America's leading proactive mental health and digital psychology expert. She's the CEO of the Digital Wellness Center, which is revolutionizing wellness through gamification, which I'm very excited to explore. We also have Nick Quechogamo, who is the financial education specialist and founder of Côté de Santé Financier, POTU, which stands for Financial Health for All, for those of you whose French is not as fluent as mine is, on an organization that works to build financial well-being. Now, what's really important about this navigation is we know that the financial well-being of our organizations and our people is so critical to the work that we do, and it's something that's often overlooked in the social sector. So really excited to have Nick with us. We also have Allison Venditti, who is a career coach, human resources, and return to work expert. Allison is the founder of Moms at Work, which is Canada's largest professional network for working moms. This is so potent and something that is so critical to our conversation around equity in the workplace, understanding what it means to be truly inclusive and meeting the needs of all of our different workers. So I think Allison's going to bring some really rich insights to our conversation today. We also have Luis Adongo, who is a systems and policy change leader and the principal consultant at Caprevent Strip, which is an inclusion and empathy-based consulting firm. And Luis is going to be exploring some concepts for us around equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, which we know are super, super critical to our work today. And finally, we also have Joanne Kerr, who's the president and CEO of the Makeway Foundation and charity. And Makeway really centers community partnerships and Indigenous-led solutions to help bridge the relationship between communities and nature. And this is so critical and really foundational to some of the opening remarks we shared about really leveraging and listening to Indigenous communities in our work. So without further ado, I really would like to have everyone come on the stage with me. Thank you all for being here today. It is incredible to see you all, and I'm really looking forward to a really rich and dynamic conversation. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody. So I'd like to start our conversation today by really looking at, the core of why we're here, right? What defines workplace well-being? It's rapidly evolved over the past 20 years. We've heard everything from don't talk about well-being at work, mental health is something you do with at home, all the way through to if you give everyone ping pong tables and free food and beer, everything will be fine. And now we're having really meaningful, authentic conversations about what it actually means to be well in the workplace. So I'd love to hear from you folks. What are some of those trends, those topics that you see are foundational to workplace well-being right now? What are the things that are sticking? And what are the things that might be fads? I'd love to let's start with Allison and then Louise, and then everyone else can kind of jump in afterwards. So I'll pass it to you, Allison, to start.
Oh, great. I get to start. I think how we work for me is really critical. There's been a lot more discussion around part-time, 4-day work weeks, in-person, virtual. And I think that's something that companies haven't really done a great job with yet, is really sort of unpacking that there are lots of different ways to work from a disability standpoint, from mothering standpoint, from elder care. The full-time work doesn't work for a lot of people. So how do we make those changes is where I see it.
Wow. That's really potent, Allison. I really like that you talked about the how we work, right? That's kind of a broader understanding of some of the topics that we hear. You always, to your point, you hear about the 4-day work week and all these sorts of pieces, but all of that does fall into this wider concept of how we work. Louise, I'm curious if you have something you'd like to add to what Allison shared, or maybe there's a different trend that you want to highlight.
I think how we work is definitely shaping workplace well-being. I remember whenever it was when we were talking about 5 generations in the workplace, and the whole conversation was about how millennials were going to change everything, and now we're into Gen Zs and Alpha, and we're really starting to see this conversation of how we work. But I also think we're seeing why we work and what we're working for and what we're working towards. And I think you alluded to it earlier. It was like, take care of your well-being at home. The workplace is the workplace. And in some ways, parts of me understands where that's coming from, but unfortunately we bring ourselves wherever we go. And so whether we want to acknowledge that it's affecting us at work or not, it is. And something that I would say that is a trend that I'm seeing around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is people are really grappling with what do you do when there isn't that equilibrium. Really appreciated the last speaker and all the really helpful practices. And we're in a poly crisis and now poly reckoning context where it's actually really hard to find equilibrium and be stoic in contexts that are not and are shifting under your feet. And it's harder and harder to just set that aside and just do your job, particularly when something that's been happening kind of parallel to this is, we've had thought leaders say, be vulnerable at work, bring yourself to work, increase belonging. And what does that mean or look like for different people? And then something I would love to just raise before I be quiet, because I see Anik is here, is we've also seen this movement to rest, right? Rest is resistance. Self-care, take the time to rest. But the affordability of rest and the ability to do that rest and how to pay for that rest is something I think that is maybe not being spoken about enough in terms of workplace well-being, is who gets to rest or who needs rest and doesn't actually rest, because by the time you're resting, you're so burnt out, you're busy recovering from burnout, which recovering from burnout is not the same as rest. So I'll just leave it there and pass it along to the next person.
Wow. That there's a lot to unpack there, Louise. You know, the recovering from burnout is not the same as rest. That really, I think, is resonant with a lot of folks in the social sector. But I know you're not, folks aren't here to hear from me. I think that you did a really good lob up to Nick, and I want to share that with Nick to kind of start the conversation around the financial well-being, and then anything else.
Yes, thank you. I think with the current situation, with the rising of the cost of living, the debt, the rising of interest rates, employees are financially stressed, and we see that employers are working to help the employees try to relieve that stress. And we see, talking about the workplace, sorry, like some employees employees programs, including financial aspect, with possible meeting with financial advisor. We see employers, organizing more and more financial well-being workshops. And so those are the trends I can see, because as you said before, talking about employee well-being was offering yoga classes on the workplace, on the workspace, offering baby food games party, etc., etc. But as trends or studies shows that financial money is a stress factor number one of employees, and as employers try to go deeper on the issue of stress, they are working on tackling the problem of financial stress and how to make sure that the employees have that financial well-being that will allow them to be more focused on the work they're doing for the organization.
Wow. I think that one's going to resonate a lot with the folks in the social sector, with a lot of the folks that are here joining us today. That, you know, financial wellness is like the foundation for so many other things. You know, how do you have time to go to your yoga classes, to engage in any other wellness activity if you can't, you know, pay your bills at the end of the day? That ties a lot to our psychological safety, for sure.
For sure. And you spoke about the employers from the social sector. That's the thing, because as myself being the founder of an NPO, I don't have the means to offer big salaries to my employees. So I need to find new ways to keep my people in my organization. And for that, I need to make sure that I take care of them. And by taking care of them, I need to make sure that I try to solve their number one issue, that is financial issues.
That's really fascinating, Nick. And I think what really resonated with me there is the thinking of creative ways when you don't have those resources, right? You're right. A lot of folks in the social sector can't compete with, you know, the 10,000, hundreds of thousands and tens of thousands of dollars extras that the tech sector is paying out. So how do we do that? And I think, you know, Mary, you have a really interesting perspective on this with the way that you do your work. Like, your work is so fascinating to really interesting and engaging ways to work with employees. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, what are some of the trends that stand out for you?
Well, I think my other panelists have really identified it's how do we work and wellness at work, but also the concept of whole self. Like Anik, I'm a small business, not an NGO, but a small business. And we had to figure out different methodologies for our staff to be happy and to be productive and to manage their families. So we looked at three things, which is mentoring, micro breaks, and measuring. A lot of what we talk about, and Louise talked about this earlier, is, the trend of the day is let's all do calm and meditate at work, or let's all do yoga and meditate at work. It's all baloney, because if you can't measure that there's a change, who cares? Our goal is change. And we need to measure that change. So measurement comes in first. And at the Digital Wellness Center, we've designed a way of just measuring your mood. All of what we do is based on mood. I think we forget that stress is in our heads. Nothing else causes stress but us. And so we begin to have to manage that. And some of the triggers are a bad mood or a good mood, when your dopamine's high or serotonin's running through your brain. And how do you get that? Well, we get that with micro breaks. And micro breaks, and I know we were going to share one, but I can lead us through one if we want to do it. It's easier with the technology. And also mentoring. One of the things that strikes me is we're always trying to reinvent things, but why don't we go back in time and look at what really worked? And what really worked when we went through major changes in our economy was mentoring people through steps, but doing it in such a way that it's measured, that it's equitable, that everyone gets the exact same or similar experience. And I've spent a lot of time doing that in major corporations across the United States, because what we see is, depending on who you are, if you're in a mentoring relationship, you get a crap mentoring relationship. It's like, whatever, I just have to do this because HR told me to do it. And let me tell you about the good old days. However, when you have a structured mentoring program and you have outcomes that the mentee wants to achieve, when everyone's measured on how they do in the program, then what you see is a much more rich and deep experience that can then be personalized, because it's a very different thing than saying, HR told me to be your mentor, I'll be your mentor, versus, hey, we're all in this program together. We have 3 goals. Like, for example, Mary, your goal could be understanding how to talk to leadership in your culture. One of our mentees' goals in one of our programs was learning how to email in a culture. A lot of us forget this. For example, in the Walmart culture, when they have what's called a sunset clause. So when they email you in the morning, you have to respond to that email by end of day. Well, in other cultures, there's a 24-hour wait period. We want to demonstrate that you're showing thoughtfulness in your response. We want a full response. And so it's very different. It's based on generational leadership when it comes down to how your brain is functioning. But you have to know that. And we don't do that when we onboard people. So the 3 trends I look at now are measurement. Are we being effective with what we're giving our team members? As a leadership, are we making any difference, or are we just causing them more stress? Are we offering them mentorship opportunities that is equal across the board? We're doing some work with, I'm sure that Joanne knows this group, Indigenous Friends Association, and we're working on mentoring programs and in the culture. And then we're talking about micro breaks, which are quick 3-minute breaks that are built into your digital day that allow your brain to experience what's caused transient hyperfrontality, which is a clearing of the prefrontal lobe. And they're fun and they're easy, and we gamify them.
Wow. That's so interesting. There's so much to unpack there, Mary. I think the fascinating piece is, it almost sounds like what a lot of the work that you're doing is trying to bridge a lot of the how we work and why in a really tangible way. You know, Allison started off talking about the how we work and how organizations are trying to figure that out. And then Louise, really brought in that concept of what's the why behind that too. And so that when a lot of these activities and activations that organizations are doing, they're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but there's a methodology and a framework and a science behind it as well.
And I think
so that's really fascinating.
in the measurement piece too. She was
Yes.
she was talking about money and what we can do and what we can't do.
And
Sorry,
I
I
was
just
just thinking,
for you, Anik.
yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that. Thanks for bringing that up, because I wanted to interject when you were saying that to say, I remember one time when I worked for the provincial government, they had a retirement planning course. And the course was always full. And it was always full with the people that were 5 years to retirement. And there were some of us who were newcomers to Canada, who were early in our careers, who wanted to take the retirement planning course. Because you know what's not helpful to you after you've had a 30-year career? 5 years of retirement planning that you could have used earlier on. And like exactly what you were saying, some of how we managed to navigate that is we just found like people who had gone to the course, so we just started asking questions of the people around us. So I really appreciate what you were saying around that. And particularly in the social sector. I really appreciate what you said, Nick. These conversations around RRSPs or increasing compensation, but then again, we have these structural barriers that we can't outrun, right? In terms of finite funding, project-based funding, et cetera, that really do impact the workplace well-being. So I know you're going to get to this at some point, but like for me, some of the trends that I would like to talk about are kind of like, what are these shadow trends? Like we are like, what is in our scope of influence and what is the thing that we can do? And there are like structural things that impact our ability to do these things that we can do. So just wanted to surface that.
The shadow trends and the structures. That's really, I think that's really where the conversation is going to go today. And Joanna, I'd love to hear from you about like, what are some of those tensions that you've navigated as someone running like a social sector organization and a really large and impactful one? How are you navigating some of those structures, and what other trends stand out for you?
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. And apologies for my terrible voice right now. I'm just getting over a flu. Ironic for a well-being summit. But I really want to ping off of where Louise just ended. I mean, what we're facing inside our workplaces is a reflection of our society. It's, you can't do this work without understanding the outside in and the inside out. And never before have we been experiencing such volatility economically, politically, socially, climatically. And we're still recovering from COVID. And so the trust deficit that emerged in our organizations through COVID, because we were all now in remote places. We didn't have that opportunity to come together face to face where you could sort out miscommunications or misunderstandings, because we all know on this call how things can get completely misunderstood through a text or an email. So here we are at this moment for our organizations where we're actually trying to figure out, what does well-being look like? And for us, it's something that we talk about all the time. Doing the work between us inside our organization is doing the work for the rest of the world. If we can't manage conflict, if we can't create a place of belonging, if we can't figure out how to do good internal comms, and that's a hard thing to do, if we can't figure out how to actually create not a one-size-fits-all, because I think there's a real danger to a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to well-being, because we're all very, very different at different places in our career, or we have different needs and very different personal situations. So how do we make sure we come forward with very tailored, peer-based well-being approaches? And I want to shout out to Future of Good for really centering this subject. Everybody is struggling right now. Everybody, especially women, especially Black women and Indigenous women who are leading organizations or leading teams, right? But everybody is struggling. So how do we bring in cultures of curiosity, of grace, of humor in order to figure this out together, right? Because there's no template for this. I've been leading in this sector for over 20 years, and I've never seen it so challenging, and to see folks challenged so much with what they're dealing with externally and all the volatility, and then how that shows up inside the workplace. And so, that Bhaskar, who talked about all the interchange that we need to do, is so critical, because sometimes we're in our own way, our own biases, our own fluctuations. So how do we come into it in a way where we can actually see each other anew every single day?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so there's so much I want to jump into on that, but I need to remember that I'm not a panelist here. Just want to really root for you folks. This is
happens every
so
time,
powerful.
Dwayne. It happens every time.
Yeah. So powerful. I mean, Joanna, thank you so much for kind of, I think, bridging all these themes together in the way that you just wrapped that up, and the importance of navigating that interchange, but for ourselves, but also our institutions, our organizations, and modeling that behavior is so critical. You know, I
That's
think
the
that
only
a
way to
lot of
change the world. We have to change
that's how you
ourselves,
change the world.
our institutions, and that's the only way to change the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's like foundational to what you shared of like, you know, our future of goods purpose, the idea of like empowering our organizations to be able to do this work. And it's so interesting. You talked about the how a lot and how this is such a difficult point in our history where it's just never happened. It's never been done. I think a lot can be said about that, but I think that, as everyone knows, the past few years on this planet have been pretty rough. You know, we've been reckoning with, you know, racial injustice, mental health crises, pandemics, wars. So yeah, everyone's in a really tough spot. So I'd love to understand how. Like, what is the how? Like, what examples are you folks seeing of organizations that are doing this work really well? Maybe it's something you've done internally at your organization, or maybe it's something that another organization has done. What is those tangible, actionable pieces that you've seen that have been successful, and what have flopped? We want to know what flops. I mean, I'm sure the folks on the call don't want to be investing in something and go, "Oh, this is not the way for us to be going." So what are those how pieces? And Mary, I know that you really wanted to highlight some of the micro learning pieces. Maybe we'll start with you, and then we'll let everyone else kind of jump in on that concept. What is the how to bringing some of these things to the forefront?
Well, I think the how my colleagues have already talked about is, first of all, you need to feel some security. And without security, none of this will work. You know, we can go into the psychological reasoning behind it. We can go into all kinds of things. But the bottom line, and Louise brought it up in her opening statement, is if you don't feel safe, you can't take care of yourself and you can't take care of others. So how do you then, as Joanne was talking about, how do you then translate that? So what you begin to want to do, and there's tons of different things. I think on TikTok, my daughter showed me something called shadow work that is old fashioned, and but it's now a new trend, which is awesome. But I think what you really have to start looking at is, first of all, security. And how do you clear your brain of stress? And there's multiple different ways. Gamification, you can use art. You just need to look at how you clear stress. And to do that, I'll just give you a little neuroscience lesson if you're willing, is
Of course.
what happens is when we start every day, and as everyone talked about COVID, we've never even had a chance to grieve COVID. Not once have we ever said, wow, that sucked. How am I going to deal with my personal loss? No one said that. I mean, a lot of us have said that in blogs, and we've talked about it with our team members. We've done everything, and our family members, but no one's come out in the world and said, yeah, so that sucked. And now how do we deal with that grief? How do we deal with the fact that students weren't even socialized during that time period? How do we deal with the changes in like so much to unpack there? So what happens is every day when you're starting your work, you're receiving messages, if you're working virtually, in a way your brain is not used to. Your brain, over thousands of years, Dwayne, you and I would be sitting in a room. We would be chatting. You would understand my physical language, my body language, my tone. We did an experiment. It's in one of my books called Message Received. And here's how the experiment went. I'm going to do it with you right now, Dwayne, if you don't mind.
Sure. Happy to be the guinea pig. Let's do this.
Psychological test. I'm not gonna share any data about you, but it's kind of fun. So
let's do it.
How are you?
I'm good.
How's your day?
Busy, very busy.
So what Dwayne just realized is the perfect social construct. How are you? How's your day? All of us have grown up with it. No matter where we are, it's a greeting. We know that I'm not asking Dwayne to give me a detailed overview of how his day started, what happened before like any of those things. Your mammalian brain, where your gut feelings are, that's just above your ears, knows that's a pattern. It doesn't need to get involved. And your prefrontal cortex, where language is, goes, yeah, great, no problem. And your reptilian brain, which is at the very back of your head, which indicates all your body functions, like breathing and digestive and everything, it's like, nobody needs me here. I'm good. Now, what we did is we sent 2 emails. First email to team members was, and understand we've done this with over 34,000 people. So we're talking about a high confidence level. in our research. And what we looked at was sending an email as a member of the team. And the first thing we would do is say, hey, how's your day? And people would get that email and they'd be like, what? People get over 650 emails a day in some cases. They're like, seriously, Mayor? You want to know how my day is? I don't think so. So you ignore it, or it goes into the trash, or however you deal with stupid emails in your email box. But you're like, oh, why did she do that? Your prefrontal cortex isn't recognizing that. And then we say, how's your day? Now, what was interesting in government, in social sectors, and in technology, and you can read this in all of our white papers, you got a totally different response. How's your day? What do you mean, how's your day? Are we getting a new boss? Am I being fired? What is happening? Why is she asking me how's my day? Does she know something I don't know? The exact same 6 words, 2 different responses. And so what happened there is your prefrontal cortex was like, why is she asking me how's my day? Your mammalian pattern goes, very few people ask me how my day is on email. What's going on? Something must be wrong. So fight or flight goes in, and you start to actually feel yourself. And all of you have done this when you're emailing someone. You feel your shoulders go up and your breathing goes into your chest. And now if you're angry texting, that's even worse. You can feel it right in your stomach. You're like, oh, whatever. I'm going to tell you. So that's and that is constant because we're not recognizing the body language. We don't recognize the tone, and we don't understand the typical signals our brilliant brain needs. And that causes chronic anxiousness. And we're dealing with chronic anxiousness across the board right now. When we ask people to do something on a team, we have to realize that 7 out of 10 of them, according to Gallup's research, are that close to burnout. So 7 out of 10 of your teammates are tired. They're not getting this. They're in chronic anxiousness. And it's because of the way we're communicating. So when we want to level set, we come up with really fun ways to do just even a movement, even taking a break. Because what's happening during the day is your prefrontal cortex right here to your middle of your ears is getting lots of clouds in them. This is how I explain it to children, because I need children to learn to take a break from the phone. So on a cloudy day, can you see the sun? And how do you sometimes feel on a cloudy day?
Pretty blah.
Blah.
Yeah, pretty blah. Yeah.
So that means that in your brain, there's dopamine and it's really low and you're not making good decisions. And the more clouds that go into your brain, your dopamine can drop, like in a glass of water, your water's empty. You have nothing more to give. Or it can start to overflow. And then there's a big mess to clean up because you're just like angry all the time. Look at my to-do list. Look at these emails. So this is a long way of saying you need to learn to manage security and understand how your brain's working. And it's not you. It's all of us. Over 70% of us are experiencing this. So let's get your security back. Understand it's your brain, just not recognizing technology. And let's take steps to get and learn how to communicate clearly on digital, because that's the other thing we don't teach.
Wow.
Yeah. I want to jump in and maybe pass it on to Allison based on what I say to jump in. So this is me listening for understanding and seeking clarity before I segue it. I'm listening to you talk about stress and talk about our tools for resilience, and I'm agreeing with that. And I am challenged, which is why I'm speaking out into the room about how this, as Dr. Jade Singleton called it, a collective cataclysmic trauma situation is up to me to manage with my prefrontal cortex and my reptilian brain. And so I'm wanting, I guess, to pass it to Allison with the amazing work that has been done with Moms at Work in terms of pay transparency and supporting people with disabilities and shifting models of work, because there is only so much that I, as an individual, can shift with the clouds and the sunshine in my brain. And I definitely see it as a tool of personal well-being. And there's actually a book I was going to reference that said, How to Thrive at Work When Work Won't Love You Back. And if work is expecting me to do certain things, what is work prepared to do so that the sunshine can come back. And so I just wanted to pass it to Allison, and then whoever wants to talk. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I can tell how I've structured Moms at Work because it's very different, and it is in response to how I've seen workplaces, exist. Noting that I have significant disability. So I was sent when I had a brain injury when I was 33 and was told I could not work, period. They were like, here's your letter. Thanks so much. And I remember the adjudicator saying, but aren't you lucky that you have children? And I wanted to reach the phone and strangle him. So that's where I'm starting. And I will say, I'm my frustration grew with exactly what Louise was talking about. And I'm so mothers got more playtime during COVID. It's working mothers are not okay. Working mothers are not okay. And I was like, can someone please stop screaming at me that I'm not okay? And then telling me to breathe more, lie on the floor, do whatever. I'm someone has to help me. And then I was great, I'm going to help people. So Moms at Work now represents over 50,000 women. And I spent my entire time during COVID, as Louise can attest to, saying, this is not your fault. To individual women, this is not your fault. We are now seeing all the structures that told us that we could have it all. And then at the first sign of anything, we said, hey, you should go back home, take care of the kids, and also do your job. No one said that to my husband. No one said that to any of the other people. And what happened was, because women are paid less, when you have two people working and you have to protect someone's job, guess whose job is being protected? Right? So all these systems were set up, and we were, spoon-fed all of this stuff, work-life balance, all the things, you can have it all. And I was and my frustration with women's organizations is I'm stop telling women to change. I'm there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with Louise. There's nothing wrong with Mary. I'm we have systems in place. And that's what Moms at Work does. We don't work on fixing individuals, right? That's not what we're there for. We're working on fixing systems. And so we are not a non-for-profit. I do not rely on funding because that creates such unsafety. Having to tell my staff that I don't know if the funding bucket's going to come in, having to sign off that I'm not going to challenge government, that I'm not going to say anything. No, thank you. I'm I can't fight for women if they're telling me to sit down and be quiet. So that's where I'm coming from. But as a structure, every single person on my team has a disability. We have 12 children between us. We do not work Fridays. We do not work school holidays. We don't work the last week of summer. We on average work between 15 and 20 hours a week, depending on two of us. I have two children at sick kids regularly. I was told that this was not possible. You can't take that much time off. You can't do this part-time. And the other thing is I pay myself the same as my staff. So I'm not a CEO out here making 5 times as much money as my staff. I'm that's not trust building. My assistant is completely as capable as I am at the things she is good at. And I don't believe that looking at examples like Loblaws and Walmart, these are not good examples of company. Sorry, I'm they're not. These are not good examples of how I want my company to run. So I talk about it all the time. We're transparent with our pricing. We're transparent about how we do business. And that's how we built trust. So I have fought every step of the way with people telling me you can't do that. And my response is, watch me. I will do it. And then I will show you that it works. And you know what? We've failed. I have no problem looking stupid. I have no problem saying I made a mistake, but I will not do that at the expense of my team or my community. So I tell them every step of the way what the plan is. And I tell them when it didn't work. And I tell them when it does work. I've been doing this for 5 years now. It's working. But I challenge every person on this call to be we can't change how we work. Yes, you can, right? We have the entire auto workers section in the United States pushing for a 4-day work week. I'm yes, you can, right? Tesla doesn't want that. Ford doesn't want that. And I was but these are companies run by people and people want that. So that's my challenge to every CEO on this call, to every person working in an organization. I'm you absolutely can do this differently. We're in social good to do it differently. So if we're not doing it differently, then why are we here doing this? So that's my example from how I've done it. But it's a challenge to put out, because if we want to be the change makers, the whole thing's called the change makers. Well, I'm then go and change something. There.
I got nothing. That's a mic drop for sure. It's a mic drop. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can add to what you just shared there, Allison, that would add any more value. I think you so beautifully summed it up. Yeah, we're here to create change. So what are we doing? All right, what are we doing? Are we going to do it? That's so powerful. I want to know if anyone else wants to share like their perspective on what that how is. Like what is the change we can do, right? What are the examples of reinventing systems that actually do support our wellness in meaningful ways? We talked to, Allison mentioned the auto workers going for a 4-day work week, right? That's something we've heard tons about. What are the other things that organizations can tangibly explore that might seem far-fetched, but maybe aren't as far-fetched as people have been telling us they are for a long time?
Well, I can preach for my sector, financial literacy at work, and just don't set up financial literacy program, financial well-being program just to set them up and to say, okay, fine, my employer brand is saying that I take care of my employees. That's what we do. Because I see many workplaces set up financial well-being programs, but not advertise it to the employees, not communicate about it to the employees, because sometimes some of them don't want employees to use them, because if the employee use them, it's going to cost money to the employer. So if we want to say, okay, we want to take care of of our employees and offer them the security they need, because that's what Mary said that really touched me. Security and financial security is very important, because in the economy we are financial security is very important for even at looking at the Maslow pyramid. The basis is financial security. And if we say we want to implement financial education, financial well-being program, in the company, first, make sure that we set them up according to the needs of the employees. Have you take the time to listen to your employee to know what exactly do they need? Because effectively, I think it was I don't know if it was Addison or Jonah who said the one size fits all doesn't work even in financial well-being. Take time to make a diagnosis, make surveys among your employees to see what are their needs, how do they want to be helped. Some of them will want to have more education. Some of them will want to be coached, because someone wants that advice. Some of them just want to be independent. Give me an app, I can do it by myself. So listen to your people. What do they need and how do they need it? Because if we say we want to help people, well, we need first start by listening to them, because they're the one who can tell us what we can do. And also, when we decide to go ahead and have those programs, make sure to communicate them. Make sure to find the right partner for that, because, as I said, financial well-being is a trend now. So we see many financial institutions saying we offer financial literacy programs. Yes, but sometimes those programs are just a front for them to sell the products, not to help employees. So just be aware of that and define what kind of partners you want for those programs for your employees. And then there are different options in the community. From that you can better choose. But just really be meaningful. When you set up a program, be meaningful about that.
You know what's really interesting?
I want to jump in on Nick's point. Je suis d'accord. I mean, that's your point about engaging your employees. It's almost the key piece of this. None of this well-being can come from just the top down or from the outside in. It has to be co-created in ways where there is a deep appreciation where people are at, and how people were at in January is different how they're feeling right now in March, right? It's also constantly changing as the external factors are affecting us in all of our ways. And so I'd say that some of our successes at Make Way have been because there's been a lot of employee engagement, both anonymous, one-to-one, team-based, really trying to understand. And where we can see the teams thriving the most is within themselves, but that across team understanding of what one needs from one another is probably the hardest piece to overcome. So, smaller organizations can manage to get everybody kind of under one umbrella, but the bigger we are, then you're stretching on some of those engagements. The common phrase, change happens at the speed of trust, is true. And these are highly relational moments right now that we're having in society, inside organizations. So how are you building, how the cultivating of the space to build conversation, relationships, trust, compassion, love, humor, celebration, all of these things are really, really critical. And so the things that flopped, if any of my make way teams are listening, I mean, I want everybody to come back in the office. I said, come on, we're all going to come back just 1 day a week, folks. 1 day a week is going to be better for your mental health. Trust me, you'll get out of your comfort zone. We'll have food. We'll have some fun together. Big old flop. Nobody's doing it. Can I get them to come in 1 day a month? No, I can't. So we really have to figure out what are the ways in which folks can come together, because there are folks that they love coming together when they do it, but what are the ways to do it? I don't know, scratching my head. We'll do more staff engagement to really figure out what are the ways. We're going to have an all staff retreat in a couple of months, and we'll dig in under that one. But this piece around coming together and engaging and building those relationships in order to listen to one another, there's a secret there. And it's not the same thing this month as it'll be 6 months from now. And so you have to keep adapting in really effective ways to listen and to hear one another.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just want to go back to something Mary said and then pick it back up to Anik and Joanna. So the security piece and how you can't level set, you can't get to equilibrium, shout out previous speaker, with all the things that are swirling. And I just read a stat that 75% of Canadians currently working now in whatever context are not happy in their jobs. But for the economic precarity and the financial situation, they would move jobs. That's pretty big. What's that saying about morale? Also, climate air quality in Canada was the worst ever for the first time in history. And we're heading into the summer months and they're just getting hotter. There's so many external and internal factors. There's the situation in the Middle East, there's the genocides in Africa. There's a lot of weather, but this climate and this weather, no pun intended, and things like financial literacy, RRSPs. Maybe it exists and I haven't seen it. Where is the social sector pension plan? As if we try to do it as individual organizations, we can't. But there's quite a large proportion of people working in this sector. Where is that? Those kind of just give us some of the stable pillars so that these things that flood our minds aren't as destabilizing as they are, because there's literally nothing that is a stable foundation. Something that is working, I think, well in Nova Scotia that was implemented is kind of a pooled health benefit plan. So to make it cheaper for organizations to pay into benefits for their teams. And I wanted to say something just in the context of my positionality and the people I know. There's similar to how we haven't talked about COVID and the grief related to COVID, Mary, we haven't had an honest conversation about caregiving. And that, yes, moms, I'm a mom, but there are people giving care in all kinds of different structures and configurations what that means to them and their amount of work for earnings longer term in their lives is not really being discussed in the way that it should. And so we're almost cascading our cataclysms by not addressing some of these things. And so those are just some of the things that I wanted to say, that I think there is a lot that can be swirly and overwhelming. And then there's I love how you just cut through, Anik, and said, finances is pretty basic. And in the middle of the precarity, and just to emphasize it one last point, the reason why I think the social sector needs its own version of this is I cannot tell you what it is like to navigate the world. I probably don't need to tell you or the listeners of either employment insurance or loans, etc., if you do not have what is envisioned by these institutions as what is stable or structured, etc. While the people in the social purpose sector understand the precarity of roles in the sector. And so I feel like whatever could be designed within the sector would understand that by the skill set you have, the experience you have, the commitment and passion you have, if we want to keep you change making, as Allison said, we need to do our best efforts to make it possible for you to opt into staying in this sector. And so what does those flexible instruments look like? It's just something I wanted to shout out. Thank you all for inspiring me to say that.
Can I jump in on the caregiving thing? Just because I think that like bang on. So 3 things are happening. One is EI is being overhauled completely. EI doesn't work for people anymore. So like Moms at Work was on the EI roundtable. We spent 2.5 years sort of figuring out what works, what doesn't work. We all know EI doesn't work well. The way CERB was rolled out under special programs, where you just kind of like clicked, which is like fast, maybe some problems, but like maternity, parental leave, adoption leave, things like that. They don't belong under unemployment. You're not unemployed. You still have a job, right? So it's under the wrong bucket. So they need to put it under another bucket. Second thing that they're looking at is an aging at home program, right? Like how to support people to keep people aging in place, how to support caregivers. There's new caregiver coalitions. My issue for like companies, yeah. Oh, and I'll also say $10 a day to childcare. For crying out loud, we've waited 50 years for this, and now it's not running perfectly. But I'm like, I was like, stop harping on what's not working. Like, get it pushed through, because it is a game changer. I went back and looked how much I spent on childcare. It was almost $47,000. $47,000 for 3 children. Okay. So like, let's talk about the economic implication of having $10 a day childcare for like women and caregivers, because typically women are the caregivers, even in caring for your parents, how much more income, how many more resources you would have in order to do that. So that for me is the big thing. I'm going to say the thing we're not supposed to say out loud. I'm like, I don't trust companies. I worked in HR for 20 years. I don't trust companies. And so like, great, they bring in a financial literacy program. I'm like, companies, for-profit companies typically exist to make money, right? That's why they exist. And I have not seen this like deep love for employees that we're like, pandering about. So what we saw post-COVID is these huge mass layoffs for people who showed up every day, kept the company afloat, put in the extra hours, did the extra things. Then they're celebrated by being let go. And I was like, that was devastating to watch, and made me say, when we're talking about trust, I look at these companies and I'm like, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I'm not going to spend my money on your products. I don't trust you. And I think that people always feel so unable to like push back. And I'm like, if you hate a grocery chain, stop shopping there. If you don't like Amazon products, I'm like, stop using it, right? Like, women control 85% of consumer spending. I'm like, you can legitimately change the world by like stopping supporting certain organizations. So that's, when we're looking at companies who are listening, and I'm like, and your CEO is making $1 million and your frontline workers are making 30,000. I'm like, that there's no trust there, even in your existence. So that's the sort of like caregiving issue, and then company issue that we have to sort of reckon with. Is it like, is this what we want to hold up as ideals? Is this what we want to support? And as Nick said, I'm like, do I trust that you have my best interests, at stake when you won't even tell me we have a financial planning workshop? I'm like, the answer is no. So all to say is, I'm like, these are overlapping things, but I'm like, I'm going in eyes open to be like, I'm not waiting for Walmart to save us, right? Like, shocking. I'm not waiting for Jeff Bezos to save us. I'm like, these are examples of companies I disagree with.
Mm-hmm. I just want to jump in, just follow what Louise said, about the program, the social sector, RSP, Pôle RSP, etc., etc. There's one in Quebec also called the Community and Women's Group Member Funded Pension Plan. But the thing is that even though that exists, many NPOs in Quebec City, first, don't know about the existence of that program. Second, may not have, don't have, the financial resources to invest in that. because they are funded by product. So they don't have, they can't include the contribution, the participation on those kind of plan for the employees in the funding they try to have. They can so, and that's why you see more and more and more non-profit organizations unable to offer group insurance pension, group insurance plans or group saving plans to the employees. So you, as an employee of that sector, you end up with lower pay, no programs, no insurance, and you have to pay more for that. So, and yes, I can come here and say let's educate them to see how they can manage the small resources they have. But at the end of the day, that's not enough. Okay, and regarding to what Alison was saying, I hear you what you say about Walmart extra, but there were at the beginning of the year or about the end of last year in Quebec, there was a scandal revealing the huge salary gap between the CEO and the employees in the social sector also. And that was astonishing, either in charities or social businesses, etc. And that was astonishing also. So the question, yes, is we want to be, because that's why I created my NPO, because I want to help people, even my employees, to make sure that we have a good working conditions. But when you see that, and mostly from people who are supposed to fund you, having those discrepancies, you kind of wonder in what world are we living, or are we going to live at the end of the day? That's just what my input on that.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I'm like a participant now because I'm just like absorbing all this information. I'm loving every minute of it. Something that really stands out is I think a universal theme I'm hearing from everyone is, we can't focus wellness just on ourselves as individuals. We have to look at structural changes. Like change maker well-being is about structural changes. And that can mean structures within our institutions and our organizations. It might be being like, maybe telling people to come to the office is going to flop, like Joanna said, and we got to figure out what is the new way of working. Like, what does that even look like? And that kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier, is like, we can't just default back to, what we've always been doing. We have to think of new ways of doing things, or maybe it's broader, like Louise brought up, of like, what are the things happening across the sector? The social sector, even if you just consider charities and nonprofits, we don't even consider, social enterprises and all these other pieces. Just charities and nonprofits contribute just as much to the Canadian GDP as the oil and gas sector does. That's a phenomenal amount of people working in one sector across the country. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars, all going towards social good. What would a national pension plan look like in that space, right? Which is really phenomenal. So structural pieces, that seems to be the core of what we're talking about. And I know that, when we think about the beginning of when we opened with Bashkar, and then some of what Mary shared earlier as well, is, looking at that inner, coming to those spaces, coming into these conversations with this sort of like balance of security and safety before we can even engage with this. And I think there's something to be said there. I am going to challenge it a little bit. I think, yes, the structures need to be reevaluated, but that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes coalitions. It takes a phenomenal amount of resources, and it can be done, right? Allison is proof of that, right? It can be done, right? But in the interim, what are we doing, right? In the interim, like, what are the things that we're going to do right now? We've been talking very big. We've been talking very broad, but I imagine there's, a charitable CEO or executive director on this call right now, on this summit, that's like, okay, yeah, I would love to join a national pension program for the social sector, but it doesn't exist. So what am I going to do? Right? Like, what is something I can tangibly do right now? Or I would love to, look at employee compensation in really meaningful ways, but I'm going to have to rewrite, employment contracts and structures for the entire team. I'm not going to be able to do that next week. So like, what are the things that I can do like today, right now, as an individual, that shows that I can build that community and culture of trust as I work through this process, because all of you have shared that trust is foundational. We can't do any of it without trust. So if we're going to walk away with like something that these folks can do, like right now, they can walk out of this call, go into the concurrent sessions, go into the break, meet with their teams. What is something that they can do that will help them set the stage for these bigger, broader change maker ideas? And I want to give some space to Mary and Joanna, because I know they haven't had a chance to share in a little bit, and then we can open it up to the rest of the team. Mary, you want to go first?
Sorry, Mary was trying to take herself off mute. Really good on digital there. So I didn't cough at anybody. I think you have to make it an issue. You know, when I, years ago, when I started working, I was in PR and we worked in politics. And I always remember being amazed by the thing that they said, which is, oh, you've got to create a crisis to get attention. And so in my mind, how you create a crisis is you have to start talking about it. And now we talk about things not by writing letters to our MPs or movements. We create social media movements. And so how can we use that to start creating a movement to get governments to discuss with us? Allison shared some excellent examples of her work, like amazing examples, superhero. And so did Anik, where you're talking to government and getting people to listen and share and change. And that's, you have to just, you know, if you have to do it, in my mind, because even if you start tweeting about it or writing a blog about it, I mean, Allison started talking about things because she didn't, and I totally 100% concur when they say to you, oh, you can't work anymore. Too bad for you. Oh, aren't you blessed with children? No, I have to feed them. Just a quick question. How's that going to happen? Like, we have to begin to start thinking about some of these things in sectors where people care for other people. And that's really what the social sector is it's people caring for people. And so how are we going to care for those people becomes the question. We're dedicated to healing. And it means, like, lots of times there's certain employees or team members that we can't hire because that's not within their goal. That's how we create and protect our team. So, and transparency that Allison talked about. We need a lot more transparency.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Mary. I'm cautious of time, so maybe if everyone else wants to share their last word on what's that one takeaway that you want folks to action today that will help us get to those bigger goals of reshaping change maker well-being. Joanna, you want to go next, and then Nick, Luis, and Allison.
First, you need to center well-being in your mission of your organization. So it's not an add-on, it's centering. Second, we have to actually take on the structure of our economy, as has been very clearly articulated. And so we can't just take neoliberalism as a given. I'm old enough to know there are many other models out there, and we need to be building the kind of economic policy and industrial policy in this country to actually take care of everyone. Number three, Makeway has just taken on this wonderful program called InnoWeave from McConnell Foundation. And part of that is to be able to provide more capacity strengthening, holistic capacity strengthening for the entire sector. So look out for stuff around that. But fourth, we also want to do a mapping of all the funding that exists in the philanthropic sector around capacity strengthening and well-being, so that that's a tool for everybody in order to get more funding to do this work. Over.
Awesome. Maybe we'll go Nick, Luis, and then we'll end with Allison.
Okay. I will just have to take time to listen to your employees. As Joanna said earlier, engage them. Listen to them. What do they need? And if there is nothing like pension plans extra for the social sector, go in the private sector. What do they do? Like, if you want some group insurance, you can have that in the private sector. For example, in my NPO, we are 3 employees, but I made sure to have at least to offer my employees and myself a group insurance. And as there were nothing in for the social sector, I went to a normal financial institution and tried to have one. But at least they have that. So if they get sick or they need to go see a massage therapist, I don't know, that is paid. fully paid by the organization. So those are some little stuff you can do. But first, listen to your employees. And another example, I want to have a pension plan for the employees we have. And I asked the question to my employee, and she said, no, that would be great, but what I need is more money. So just make sure to offer me a better salary. That's it. So sit down with your employees, listen to them, what are their needs, and how do they want to be helped?
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Nick. And Luis, off to you, and then we'll wrap up with Allison.
Yeah. I would say, I think we've kind of modeled a little bit of the things that I think you could do right after this in this conversation, which is one is, as James Baldwin says, you can't change what you can't face. So face that it's big, it's structural, that it's not just you. People are not okay for whatever reasons and whatever generation and whatever context. And there is a next step that you can take. And I think you had said that this was directed at the leaders in the organization. But I would say anyone in the organization, because I think there is structural leadership and then there is personal leadership. And anyone can start the conversation. Anyone has the agency to say, hey, something's not working here. How can we do things differently? And so the vulnerability, the ability to have the vulnerability to start that conversation, I agree with your challenge, is focus on how you can get to a place of safety within yourself, and you're thriving regardless of what your workplace is doing, because you take yourself wherever you go. And if you're not feeling okay at work, then you're not feeling okay in other places. So access the tools and resources available as you are able, read what you can, build safe communities of care, and build your personal, emotional, social, and metaphysical resilience, because the things that are happening outside of our control are going to continue to be happening, and we will be battered by them. But our ability to face those things is impacted by where we are in terms of being centered with ourselves. And if you fall out of equilibrium, it's okay. You know that you can return, is what I would say.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. And Allison, wrap us up.
Okay, I'm going to make it quick. One, change is uncomfortable. Nobody says it wasn't supposed to be comfortable. So that idea of like, this sounds hard, I'm like, it's supposed to be. That's how it works. Second point is, like everybody had asked, I'm like, the 3 things that they're most proud of. Like, think of the 3 things in your life that you're like, I'm so proud that I did that. And then the next question I post that is like, were they easy? Never. The things that you are most proud of are never going to be easy. So just because they're not easy doesn't mean that they're not worth it every damn time. And the third one is, I'm like, people will not believe in you. I have hundreds of emails telling me that it's not possible. That won't work. That's a ridiculous idea. Pay transparency will never happen in Ontario with a conservative government. It did. I'm like, people will tell you no all the time. I'm like, you have to find people who believe in you, because change happens. It's amazing. And it's worth it every single time. So I'm going to leave that with everybody who's thinking that a pension plan is too hard. How do we even start that? I'm like, just one step at a time. That's how these magical things happen.
Amazing. I have nothing to add of value other than that. I mean, Allison is really good at the mic drops. So Allison, Mary, and Nick, Louise, Joanna, thank you so much for opening our Changemaker Wellbeing Summit today. Everything that you've shared has been so resonant, and I think will inspire folks to deeply engage with the workshops and concurrent sessions that are to come, and that those workshops and concurrent sessions will hopefully have them make those first steps for themselves, for their teams, and for the broader social sector as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who are still with us in this stream, we're now going to be transitioning to our first of our concurrent session blocks. So if you are going to be participating in the first session, that you will be staying here in this main stream. Otherwise, please make your way over to the event hub. That is the menu on Sugo to select the concurrent session that you have chosen to participate in today. Thank you so much and enjoy your concurrent segments.